In this episode of On Doers, we talk to Hugh Acheson. Hugh is a local chef with hits such as Empire State South and Spiller Coffee, as well as Delicious Outpost in Savannah with the Florence, and his original 5 and 10 in Athens. He's also been a judge on Bravo's Top Chef, where he says the darndest things. And he has written great books like A Turn in the New South and The Broad Fork. Don't be fooled. He's a James Beard Award winner as a chef and an author. We talked at Switchyards Downtown Club in Atlanta.
Did a lot of research and stuff. And one of the quotes that stuck out to me was, "I was good at whatever I did in kitchens." So if you want to set the stage, where you're from, Canada, your hometown, what that was like.
Let's see. I was born in Kingston, Ontario, Canada, which is on the St. Lawrence. And my dad was a tenure professor, or just a beginning professor there, and he moved shortly after I was born to accept a tenure track position at Carleton University in Ottawa. And that's where really I grew up. I have 3 older sisters. I was dressed in dresses a lot because of it. I come from a really, really super academic family, and I am not. I'm well-read and relatively intellectual. I'm not academic, and I was never academically inclined. So when I was 14 years old, and actually there was a brief time, we were raised by a single dad as well, which is poignant and beautiful in a lot of ways, and he's an awesome dude. But I lived in the States for 4 years when I was quite young, from 11 to 15, and I lived for 2 years here on Rumson Road in Garden Hill, and went to Christ the King, even though I've been an atheist since I was born. I remember jumping out going, I don't believe that stuff. And when I moved back to Canada at 15, I finished up high school up there, and I guess I was like 14 and a half, and I got my first job, and my job was dishwashing. And by the time I was 16 years old, I was working 40 hours a week after school, and I was working in really good restaurants and doing all this stuff. And it was because I just wasn't doing well in school and didn't really care. I played snooker during the day, skipped school, drank a lot of coffee. And but food was this endless topic that I could immerse myself in and find a trade about and have something to fall back on. And it was also the place at 16, 17 years old, I would walk into a kitchen and 45-year-old guys would be like, I'm glad you're here. That's awesome. That's good. Get them on. I was just good at it, and I tried harder than everyone else around me, and it's still what we do.
Did you cook at home when you were
Hell
14?
no. I was raised on fish sticks and canned yellow wax beans.
Are those Canadian staples?
No, they're single dad who works 70 hours a week staples. He learned how to burn rice early. He loves burnt toast. I have a piece of burnt toast on my arm as an homage to my dad. My dad's an amazing guy, though. He's a very critically lauded economics professor, and he's brilliantly smart. He got his PhD at Cambridge, and full ride all the way through. He also was an amazing athlete, but he was drafted in the Canadian Football League and into the NHL because he was the captain of the UFD Blues and all this, but he was just this guy who worked really hard and raised us as 3 daughters. I mean, a single dad raising 3 daughters is the strangest sitcom ever. And then there was me, and I was this little punk kid. So,
What was the first experience besides dishwashing that told you were good in a kitchen?
I got a job at the end of high school at a little place called Vienna Cafe, and I was in charge of the entire kitchen. And it was a small kitchen producing really sort of Viennese soups and sandwiches, but everything was up from scratch, and it was good. And I was kind of in charge of it, and I had like 3 employees who were like 50 and 55 years old, and I'm like 18, 17. And it was really strange, but I was really good, and I kept getting lots of weird accolades and reviews and stuff like this. And I was like 17. I was like, I had no idea. I remember going out on Canada Day, which is July 1st, and not July 4th. Maybe soon. We have a man who may invade them now. And getting brutally sick because I'd been out like drinking till like 8 o'clock in the morning or something like that, and being at work and looking at ham and slicing it and going, oh, this is not going to work. I just felt queasy. So I wasn't really responsible, but I was really good at what I did.
And people seem to respect you, even at 17.
Even at 17, yeah. I mean, it's a what. Look, I got 2 girls who are amazing, Beatrice and Clementine, 12 and 14. Beatrice is 14, and they at 15, B has to get a job. At 15, both of them have to get jobs. They have to work. I don't care. We have enough money. They'd be fine, but they have to work. They have to work 20 hours a week. It teaches you punctuality. It teaches you the idea that you have to show up and be a parent and try hard. It teaches you professionalism. It teaches you the ideas of engaging with people who are very distinctly different age groups from you. And it teaches you engagement in learning a craft. And I don't care if it's pumping gas or if it's bussing tables or if it's painting sidewalks. You got to work.
Did you create that rule from your experience, or was that a rule for you growing up also?
No, it was definitely not a rule for me growing up, though. It was probably pretty smart. A lot of my sisters are way older, so a lot of my life was just spent growing up in a house just with my dad. So he was never really home because he worked. And then, my dad has the same sort of endless fascination with numbers and economic theory as I do with food and beverage. So he's this guy who I would hear typing at like 2 a.m. in the morning because he was writing a paper and stuff like this. He was just endlessly engaged in what he did. So that taught me an ethic of really getting into what you do. But the work for me was just like purely a result of needing to find something and finding work and having it be really redeeming to me. So I think that it teaches my kids the wherewithal of having to show up. So that's the reason it's a new rule.
One more on background before we go to Athens. Your dad being a professor, how did he handle your dislike of school and how hard it was for you in school?
Well, the old credit card slips that were carbon? You tear at the center and they give you
maybe. I don't.
Well, if you trace over him, it leaves a perfect signature on the report card, so he didn't really figure it out until probably in the last year of high school when I was like totally flunking out. And I went off to college and did 2 years at Concordia School in Montreal. If you guys have never been to Montreal, I love Atlanta. Atlanta is, as we're exhibiting, this amazing city that has found itself and is so young and inspiring right now and so artistic and so cool and more full of life than I've ever seen it. So kudos, but go to Montreal someday, just to visit for a week. Don't go in the winter, it's fucking brutal. It is an amazing city, and it's right there. And it's inexpensive, it's totally artistic, it's totally pedestrian, it's totally wonderful. And the people there are great, and they're great food. Okay, what's
the first food to eat in Montreal?
There are 3 restaurants all side by side, all of them 2 guys, David McMillan and his partner, Joe Beef, Vin Papillon, and Liverpool House, which are, Joe Beef is the best restaurant in the world. It's just they're so authentic and the food is so good. But you can only eat there once a year because it's like deathly rich food. But Vin Papillon is amazing too. Just amazing wine program. It's really cool. It's in Little Burgundy, which is this great neighborhood. So, but there's a gazillion restaurants to look at in Montreal. Email me. I'll make you a list.
So you make your way down to Athens, which is culinarily, or you said culinarily it was a little podunk at the time.
It was a desert. It was a desert of chains. There were some independent restaurants there. So this is first time I moved to. My wife Mary is from the South, and I had met her when we were very young, and we were just don't go ooh and ah. It always creeps me out when people do that. We met when we were 12. We were just friends, and then we were pen pals for a really long time, and then we got married when we were 24. Shut up. So. And we got married in Charleston, South Carolina, but we had been living in Ottawa, and we rented a U-Haul and drove in her Mazda 323 with all of our belongings in a very small U-Haul, wiggling down the Appalachians. Mazda 323 is the worst car of all time. Very underpowered for a U-Haul. And we moved to Athens so Mary could work with an amazing professor in art history named Andrew Lattice, who has now passed away. But Andrew was an Italian Renaissance professor who is amazingly gifted and talented and really super sweet man. So I was coming from very fine dining in Canada, having left a number of jobs in very, very serious, like Michelin-starred, fancy restaurants. And I get down to Athens, Georgia, and there's not really much for me. But I took over a restaurant that was still busy at the time and is horrendously busy now, yet wasn't as good as the 2-year tenure that I was there, called The Last Resort. And it was aptly named for my situation. But I got paid very well at a very young age to run the front and the back of the house. So ostensibly, I was the everything there. And it was challenging but fun, but I fell in love with Athens. And then we stayed there for 2 years and then moved to San Francisco, where we lived for 2 years. And I figured out that I'm actually decidedly middle class and cannot afford San Francisco. I think I was getting paid $42,000 a year working at a restaurant called Mecca, and I think my rent was $1,800 a month, and Mary was making like $12,000 a year at UC Davis or whatever, UC Berkeley, in their University of California Press. But got a lot of worked a lot of really great restaurants, and opened a very famous restaurant called Gary Danko's, an executive sous chef there. Left shortly thereafter, and got an offer to come back to Athens and open up what would become 5 and 10 with the woman who owns Last Resort. And very soon so we wanted to leave. Mary and I wanted to leave fine dining and open up a community restaurant back in Athens, a town we had fell for. And not so much that I've fallen just for Athens. Athens is an amazingly interesting town. There's a whole layer above. A lot of you probably went to UGA. Go Dogs. We suck this year. But there's
Are you a Bulldogs fan?
I am. Yeah, football. I'm actually a Tech basketball fan. I'm very confused, but whatever. There is a layer above Athens of artistic community and music and amazingly tempered, sort of very respectful group of people who is way beyond the students in a lot of ways that exist that you never really see, and it's a beautiful cadence town to live in. But I fell in love really with Georgia, and I fell in love with this idea of Southern food and this crazy complexity of Southern food. Southern food is the hardwood of history of gastronomy in the United States and North America. I mean, it's got the most density and interesting things written about it. It's got a tome of things that I can delve into every day to reinterpret and to make spins off of and learn the general depth of. And it's having a renaissance, but it's also having a comeuppance, which is important to do in the idea of Southern food, because Southern food came here on the back of a population that were slaves, and we're finally giving to the credence to the fact that it's a very painful history of Southern food. It's not, my grandma made, roasted ham and biscuits. It's like, no, somebody came over with okra seeds in their pocket because they're forced to be a rice farmer here. So this is a coming to terms with the history of food that's really difficult for a lot of people because they're racist. And but we're changing slowly but surely, we hope.
Doesn't sound like you were as excited about Southern food when you moved to Athens, though, from your retelling.
Yeah, I remember going to a Thanksgiving at my wife's family house and not being able to go to the bathroom for like 10 days. It was all like I thought, like, literally thought I was gonna have to go to the hospital. It was like laid out layer of like 18 casseroles and this like chalk dry turkey. So there are some bad execution of Southern food, but that's not the true Southern food. I mean, true Southern food is purely a reaction to an agrarian economy. It's very thrifty and smart use of stuff. But it's pure, and it's got a kinship most to Italian food in my mind always. So, but yes, I think the beauty about Southern food is I think we finally identified that it's still being defined, and it's important not to take a moment of time in the late 1940s to 1965 and say that's Southern food. That's not. Food takes eons and centuries to fully define. So Chinese food is not being done defined yet. It's been around for thousands of years. In the same way, we have a very nascent system of classifying our food.
So you mentioned this. You come back to Athens and you open 5 and 10. Is that right? 5
Yeah.
and 10. And our community here is startup-y, entrepreneurial. So I want to get into a little bit about what opening a restaurant is as a business. And you described it as dragging your face over gravel the first year.
Yeah, for like months. It's really opening restaurants is really, really stressful. As a lot of your my job is no more stressful than anyone else's life here. Opening restaurants is just different stress. You think you have it all lined up, and then opening day happens, and every system you've created falls apart and has to be reconstrued and rebuilt. And half of the people leave because they weren't. It just shit happens basically. And your dreams and aspirations of what you've defined it to be get easier to execute over time, the number of times you do it. But the first few times is it's a work of utter difficulty in a lot of ways. The other thing is you got to realize, like, I was an anomaly compared to how people open up restaurants now. We opened up 5 and 10 with $112,000, which is, you can't do anymore. To put that into perspective, Empire State South cost about $3.8 million. It's a little bit different realm now. But when I opened up, I painted the walls and I painted the ceilings. I put together the tables. This is 5 and 10, and I did everything. I mean, for the first 10 years of that restaurant, I was the guy who cleaned the urinals every morning, and people would still be surprised that I was the guy answering the phone and taking reservations. So it was just a one-man show. I did the payroll. I did all the office work. I got in there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I left at 12:30 at night every day, 6 days a week. And I took Sundays off because I flipped out so bad one Sunday brunch that a couple of people told me never to come back. And I was like, I own this place. And they were like, no, never come back on Sunday. And I was like, is this a Jesus thing? I don't even believe in that stuff. And they were like, no, don't come back. Brunch doesn't like you. And I was like, okay,
I have to ask what you did.
I never came back.
No, what you did that people flipped out.
5 and 10 is a moderately exposed kitchen. You can see it at the very end of it. This is the old 5 and 10, not the new one. And the furthest table away is actually beyond another door and a number of glass windows, and would be table 29 in the far corner. I was screaming obscenities so loudly that those people left. And it was a full restaurant, and that was the furthest table away. So I don't know how it impacted the rest of the people. It was a little bit difficult. And I'm not a yelling chef usually. I'm actually very calm in the kitchen.
So you said that. There we go. You were stubborn about the restaurant, and that's why it succeeded. What was it that made you want to keep working that hard and do all the jobs? And what kind of reaction were you getting from people that told you that this was something that was going to work? Right, because that's what a lot of startups are looking for, or businesses even are looking for, that little bit of validation that, yeah, they've got an idea, and so they're going to stay up late and work on payroll.
You got to know your idea is right. You've got to be really proud of your idea. You've got to know it's got definitely something there to be proud of and push through. Look, a lot of us come up with ideas that are a little ahead of their time. It's not like we're prodigies or anything. We're just maybe one step ahead in that one vantage point of our lives. We all have a gazillion vantage points. I have one culinarily, and my experience as a chef brings me a totally different prism than a lot of other people. I can probably create a restaurant pretty quickly that 90% of you would thoroughly enjoy. But at that point in time in 2000, the culinary landscape in Athens was difficult. So I couldn't take chances as much as I had before in my career and have since. We had to be a teaching restaurant. It was busy. We weren't making much money in the first year. My business partner was very disappointed. She kept threatening to really change the project overall, change the name, change it into a roasted chicken place. And I was like standing there going, what the fuck?
That's allowed. You can say that louder.
Well, and I looked at her, and I remember in a meeting one time, and she's like just kind of berating me, and I was like, look, stop. I work 90 hours a week in this restaurant. I'm putting my heart and soul into it, and I'm doing absolutely everything. I've got this, and I believe in this. And if you want to show me the door, I will walk the fuck out of it. But don't change this, and if you do, I will walk out that door. And so, and she was kind of in a difficult position because she couldn't change. She didn't really want to be there. She couldn't change it without me really wanting to be there. So 2 months later, I bought her out for a cheap price too, because she didn't like me anymore, and that was okay with me. And so, in year 14 months after it opened, look, you got to turn off your phone faster. You got to be tough in this world, and you've got to. And we'll talk about this given the last 2 weeks of all of our lives. We've got to be tougher than ever, and we've got to believe in ourselves more than ever. But at that point in time, I believed in what I was doing, and I was going to make it work. But I also believed in taking chances and putting myself out there and being fast enough to duck the guillotine and pull away if that was going to happen. So what I did is I emailed, probably from my Excite account. This is way before Gmail. And I emailed this guy named John Kessler, who's with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
He's retired now, right?
Well, he lives in Chicago, and he does a lot of other writing from there now. But he was an amazing food critic for the AJC for years, won a ton of James Beard Awards, really amazing writer. And I was like, John, I emailed him, I was like, I run this little restaurant in Athens. I know we're not in Atlanta. I would love you to come over and review us. Got nothing back. Well, 4 months later, we got reviewed. And at that point in time, they were, it was a 4-star system. We got 3 out of 4 stars. I never expected we'd get 4. We weren't that fancy. We were higher end, but it was very eminently community restaurant and casual and open. And the review was amazing. The review was like, this restaurant is kind of the future of restaurants in Georgia. This is what it's all about. This is so cool. Who is this guy? It was all this stuff. And then 4 months after that, I got Food and Wine Best New Chef. And reviews and accolades, they're not the most important thing to me at all, but they were for business because it just busted open at that time. I mean, we just had lineups at the door. We had people driving over in limos from Atlanta. I remember this like fancy bus pulling up one time, and I was like, shit. And it just changed. It was like a paradigm shift in what I was doing. But it also, look, when we work as hard as we do in this, when I chose to work from the age of 14 and pretty much have virtually no social life except for going out for a beer after work, when I woke up 6 days a week at 7 o'clock in the morning to get a coffee and read a cookbook and write menus for the week and get home at 1 o'clock in the morning 6 days a week, I had nothing. I had me. So it's nice once in a while when you work that hard and do a good job that you're proud of, that you get an accolade, that you get a pat on the back from the general public and from a critic saying you're doing well. Well, now we get it from Yelp, which is more like a slap and a punch in the face and a poke in the eye and a finger up the ass. And it's great fun. I don't actually read that shit, but whatever.
Oh, we skipped ahead. The quote was about, nope, not that one. It was you saying that you like what you've built. And I wanted to ask you why, I don't know what's going on. Let's just, I wanted to ask you why you focus so much on Georgia, Savannah and Athens and Atlanta, instead of expanding geographically.
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of offers for, hey, you should open up in Vegas. You should open up in Miami. You should open up. And maybe someday we'll do stuff like that. But right now, it's like my community is just not that big. My community is, I put it larger than Athens on purpose because I like traveling and getting in my car and driving around the state. But I like seeing things. I like crossing over the Altamaha River. I love going down to Charles or to Savannah and checking along the coast, and I believe in the mountains of North Georgia and the agrarianism and going down to Thomasville, and I don't know, there's a lot here. So if you close your eyes to what's around you and just look at the next payday of a restaurant in Vegas, I think you'll lose the scope of trying to buy into your community and immerse yourself in the community. So.
What else excites you about Georgia, or what's kind of next in Georgia, or you're thinking about locally?
How many years are we talking?
Well,
I'm
I know
looking
you
for
don't
political change, but that's okay. What excites me about Georgia? I mean, there's just a lot going on here that's good. I mean, I think we're seeing a massive willingness to progress despite the number of hurdles that are put in front of all of us every day to be a progressive state.
All right. So this quote is about the circus of TV, and you wanted to be involved in the circus. So a lot of people here know you from Top Chef, obviously, Top Chef Masters, and then as a judge. And you talked a lot about, I've heard and read that you or you said you didn't want to do Top Chef for a while. Why is that? Why didn't you want to do it from the beginning?
I mean, when Top Chef started in 2007, and I remember going home early because I was excited about this show. It was interesting. Conceptually, it was a great show in reality television. It was one of the first, it was one of the granddaddies of reality TV, and it was really interesting to see what they're going to do and how it was going to work, and it was going to show off this industry that I toil in and cut myself in, and and this is my life, and it was exciting to see. And I started watching it. It was great. Do I need to talk louder? I can't. I sound loud to myself, so I don't want to scream at you. And it was interesting. And then about 2-3 seasons into it, I started getting calls from them, from the production company Magical Elves. And I just kept saying no because it's so easy to want to do something and completely get vilified within the first 5 minutes for someone you're not. So it's you have to play it carefully in reality television. And I was also still working really hard at the restaurant, and I only had one restaurant. When you have one restaurant, you work all the time. When you have 2 restaurants, you're about to lose your mind because you're kind of vacillating between the 2 really quickly, and you're worried about both of them at the same time. When you have 3, you can begin to disappear, and when you have 4, they don't even know where you are. Because you've had to put in place people better and smarter than you in positions of power to run those places every day to the specs that you want them to run. So I'm lucky now because I have 4 and can disappear. So Top Chef Masters, right, probably 6 months before I opened Empire, 2010, called me and they were like, do you want to be on this show? And I was like, you know what, sure. I said sure for one reason. It's for charity, so it didn't look like I was going to be greedy. And if somebody questioned as to why I was doing it, I could shrug and just say, it's for charity. What do you want? What are you, evil? So I had that up my sleeve. It's always good to have something in the back pocket just in case to pull out as a good excuse. I went on that show and lost in the first episode. I wasn't really that bummed. And I got invited back because somebody on the show did not want to compete anymore. So it was the first time ever somebody was kicked off and then brought back within the same season. And I remember them calling me at the hotel, and I had just woken up, and it was like 9 o'clock in the morning. I woke up late, and I had this great itinerary of I was going to go out to lunch, and I was going to go to the museum by myself, and I was going to go do some writing and doodling and menus and whatever and call my people. And they're like, can you come back on? I was like, fuck no. They were like, we really need you to. And so I did. And I lasted a really long time in that season. And it's not as stressful as regular Top Chef. It's easy and it's fun. The chefs you work with are great. I even like Severe Saran now, but that's a longer story. What it gave me, in the very beginning, I realized that nobody was really saying anything of any pertinence or any humor or any wit. So I'm a good person to take advantage of a situation quickly. And because I knew that the cameras would only, the guy who won is a wonderful chef named Floyd Cardoz, and he's a wonderful man. He only would ever talk about his 2 sons and how proud he was of them whenever the camera's in front of him. And I realized, I'm like, the producers and editors are going to go through this, and they're going to want to show that once. But if that's all he talks about, he's going to get very little camera time. So I just came up with everything under the sun and just started cracking jokes and making fun of every situation and cooking. And and running around and being a sort of frantic, fun, interesting, sarcastic moron. And I got so much airtime that they started making reels separate on Bravo.com of Hugh says the damnedest things, and they're like 6, 10-minute, and it's just me like riffing on shit and going crazy, and nobody else is saying anything. So I'm standing there making fun of somebody's hair or whatever it is, and I just kept talking, and they loved it, and I was like, boy, this is easy. And so they invited me to start judging on a show called Top Chef Just Desserts, which is short-lived, and then they got me on the regular show. And I don't even do it that much, but it's funny in this world of business that I'm in. It is it's the biggest and most powerful business card that you will ever have, is to be able to say, I was on TV. The amount of TV I've done has added up to probably half of 1% of the time I've spent working in the last 10 years. It's just trivial amount of time. Yet it begets me corporations wanting to fly me to Lake Tahoe to give a presentation, and they'll pay my mortgage for the next 5 years. And it's like, where was this money before? And it's like, well, we want you to rep this brand and do a dinner. And before, 10 years ago, it'd be like, we'll pay you $2,500 and we can give you 1 hotel room for your 6 guys. And I'm like, I'm an adult. And now it's like, well, we'll pay you $75,000 and have somebody massaging your butt. It's like, I don't know, but it's like, well, you're on TV. I don't get whatever. So.
Do you mind that, or do you wish people knew you more for your cookbooks and your writing?
Yes and no. I mean, I don't really care. The one thing that I always back up to, which is I was a success to myself before TV. And look, success it's here. It's not how well you Google. It's just not. Success is what you put on your tombstone. Success is Hugh Acheson, very proud father and employer of hundreds of people. It's not like, what are you going to fit, James Beard Award winner? Who cares? There's so many chefs out there who fucking toil in kitchens. We will never know their names. And they work hard, and they're awesome. And there are plenty of people in this world that we will never care about, who deserve all the accolades in the world. So, I don't know. Success is what you make it. If somebody calls me a celebrity chef, I'm like, ooh. It's a term that it debases what you've worked so hard to do.
So you've talked a little bit about getting lucky and about having good timing. Did you recognize, it sounds a little bit like you recognize Top Chef as an opportunity, or I don't know. So luck is what you make of it, right? Or you make your own.
Yeah,
luck.
no, I mean, I am the luckiest guy in the business in a lot of ways.
You kind of recognize an opportunity.
Chefdom is extremely competitive and ego-filled, and I've chosen to not play that game, and I refuse to. I'm not the best chef in the world. I'm not the best chef in Atlanta. There are plenty of chefs that you guys don't even know the names of that can cook me under the table. I have good cheekbones, 1 eyebrow, and I can cook. I'm very proud of my ability to cook. I'm very good at what I do. Now in business and in restaurants and in consulting and building teams and running coffee shops and all the different things that we do, my job is to be the baseball manager. I put the team on the field. My job is to change the pitcher and to find new talent that I can put in the outfield, is to have a bench that I can bring in when I need them to. So I control the lineup now, but my job is to find people who are better, smarter, and more passionate than me. I will lead them and I will teach them to become leaders, and I'll teach them how to coordinate a number of different personalities in a business that's really exploitive and crazy and hyper tense and charged into a carefully beautiful performance of good hospitality. I will teach them that. That's what I'm good at.
What's the #1 trait you look for when you hire someone?
Want, not experience. Cooking schools are churning out useless people at the fastest pace that I've ever seen it. They come into the industry that I've loved for many years. That is not a easy industry at any speed. It's hot. It's grueling. It's difficult. It's very demanding. And they last a week, and then they quit, and they're just they're just not ready for it. So what I wanted is somebody who is 22 years old, has been traveling the world for 2 years, and has staged at a lot of restaurants, but just has world experience and knowledge, and knows how to navigate a airport in a land where nothing is in English, and they got through. They felt comfortable approaching somebody in the street and asking for directions. They look down when they're eating a meal. They show respect and make eye contact when communicating. I mean, it's essentially what I'm looking for in a perfect kid. You know, it's just in a kid you want to raise. It's like you're looking for smart humans who are adept and want to work hard.
You talked a little bit about learning, and I found this interesting because some would argue you are an expert, but this is a mindset, right? So that you're curious and that you're learning. What is it about, kind of, why did you set your mind that way, and how do you continue to learn?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask me why I'm good at what I do. It's because after that 90-hour week, I'm the kid who, at 24 years old, 22 years old, I was the kid having a beer on my front porch reading about what I do every day. And learning about hospitality and learning about wine. And realizing that at some point soon I would have to write my own wine list because I couldn't afford a sommelier with my first restaurant. That I needed to learn table service in front of the house. That I needed to learn basic accounting and understand things. But then there's this beautiful world of food and beverage and the history of it. And it's not just in the South, it's worldwide. And we've got this access to information that is endless. And to find that endless topic that stimulates you, makes you so amazing. It's like finding the lover you never tire of. I mean, it's like, it's a rare thing, right? But when you find something like that, you stick with it. But the expert thing is, I find as soon as someone calls themselves an expert, you put a door in front of you to expanding your horizons on what you want to know. And I don't want to limit myself in what I know about this. I know a plenty. I always equate what I know. I teach people who definitely do not know how to cook a lot, like outside of the restaurants. And I always equate food and cooking to, it's a set of Lego, and each piece of Lego is a technique. And I just have a bigger Lego set than most of you, and can build much bigger buildings. But with that Lego set, you can cobble it together in so many different ways and build so many things, which you all need at least 12 Lego pieces, unless you really like Kraft macaroni and cheese, which is like a broken piece of Lego.
What do you read and study about? What's the next biggest thing you read about after food?
I don't have my book bag with me. What am I reading right now? I'm rereading Kurt Vonnegut Calms Me. So I'm reading Cat's Cradle again. I read a lot of stuff on politics, which is fun right now. Kind of makes me cry. And then what do I read on a very diverse plane. I'm a huge music lover, and I read about the history of a lot of punk bands and a lot of old zines. I read crazy, weird stuff on the internet. We need to create a better way of sharing internet links, though. Like, what do you read every day? What are the sites you go to every day? I go to, write this down, Kudal.com, which is the people who make those little field notes workbooks. His design firm has the separate site. It's C-O-U-D-A-L.
He was here last night.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
It's an awesome, yeah, he's badass. Draper?
Draplin.
Joppa. Amazing website, and on page 2 it has all these crazy links on all these disparate topics of just stuff. So it's art, it's everything, and it's the way we keep up with the world is the more we see, the better we are. You know, but I also go out a lot when I travel. Like yesterday I was in New York, and I woke up and I had to work for a couple hours on a project, and then I went to the Whitney and wandered around. And look, I have total ADD. I'm not a great person in a museum. I gotta move. I gotta move pretty fast to the museum. But I saturate really quickly, and I understand stuff pretty quickly. So give me an hour and a half in a museum, I'm great. And then I went for a nice meal with a friend of mine, Pablo Johnson, who is in New Orleans, and we talked about the mindset after Katrina being very similar to, in New Orleans, being very similar to the mindset of progressive Americans in the last 10 days. And we drank some wine, cried a little bit, and then I went to the airport. But yeah, so I mean, look, you got to learn every day something. We don't improve as humans if we don't. And you just got to learn something. It's like I tell my kids this all the time. You got to learn something.
I think that's a good place to end this Q&A. And if it's cool with you, we'll open it up for a few minutes.
Ain't scared.
Yeah, for public Q&A. Sarah.
And that's probably just culinary knowledge. So the question is, what's the best way to identify your palate, your own individual palate? I mean, I think your palate's going to change. The American palate's changed so much in the last 10 years, which is this is a interesting conversation that it just to put it into perspective that it was a culinary mind, but it was Tom Colicchio that I was talking to after we filmed a show where something was technically amazingly beautiful and classic and was boring. And it's because you didn't eat kimchi 10 years ago, but you do now, right? Or you may hate kimchi, I don't know. Do you hate kimchi? Okay, you love it. But you didn't eat it 10 years ago. So things like kimchi and the sense of umami has expanded our palates and has made our palates understand spice and nuance and breadth, palate widening sensations more than ever. So more inflection of spice and umami and heat and all these things and sour and acids and the impact of more use of vinegar and citrus and stuff like that in food has taken us away from that very boring time of sort of continental food and sort of classic Southern food, which a lot of it's very dull in flavor profile, and really expanded our want. So what we determined in that conversation, him drinking way too many gin and tonics and me drinking probably too much bourbon, so that's always debatable, was that this dish had failed because it had none of those attributes that all of us want right now. I mean, we want to be pushed now, palate-wise. Like I was at Spiller earlier working on, we're opening a new Spiller and working on design of that with Dale. And I wandered over to Marrakesh, which makes these sort of shawarma type things. And it was fine, but I had ordered it with hot sauce and it was just really under-seasoned and really not very spicy. And it was just like, I grew up in Ottawa, Canada, which is a massive Lebanese culture. And so like shawarma is like the thing. And it wasn't great. So I was kind of like, but it was dull and it shouldn't have been. And my palate noticed. And your palate would have too. I think just train your palate. It's like a dragon. How would you define Southern food to people who think it's just fried everything? Okay, so you're just as likely to eat a bucket of fried chicken in North Dakota as you are in Thomasville, Georgia. I mean, it's just, Southern food is, it's not the food that ails us. It's not the food that kills us. That's a certain iterance of Southern food. Southern food best is written about by a number of people, but Edna Lewis is probably writes the most prosaically. May she rest in peace because she's a badass woman. And she writes about blackberries in one piece, about this reverence for blackberries in her hometown of Virginia and when they came into play, what it meant. And that blackberries with a little bit of sorghum over it, with and then fresh buttermilk, churned buttermilk over the top of it, and eaten like cereal in the morning. And she talks about those berries exploding in that beautiful dairy. That's Southern food to me. That's the Southern food I want. Southern food to me is Polk Salad, which is a simple like dandelion green salad of foraged stuff, really simply done with vinegar and olive oil or any oil that it was. But it's a reaction to the season that's around us. It's a peach pie. It is things with pork and stuff like that, and it is barbecue, and it is fried chicken. But you've got to realize the diversity of food has become, as food has become so cheap in this world, our protein amount has increased to the point where it's absurd. And a dish of fried chicken 100 years ago would have been fried chicken, a little bit of fried chicken, maybe one chicken for like 8 people, and then a tomato salad and some spinach salad and rice and peas and some peeled peas here and okra there. And it would have been a pretty big spread, mostly from the garden, because as Southern food is meant to be a very self-sustaining thing. It was grown a lot in your own backyard. It was bought at the local market. Protein was exorbitantly expensive for most families to really feed themselves on. So that classification of Southern food occurred in the 50s and 60s as food got really desperately cheap. And it's when we all saw the sudden rise of type 2 diabetes and obesity. So, yeah. Southern food is like what Steven Satterfield makes. They're from Southern California? Yeah. Well, the food's... Yeah. What is my vision for myself now and in 10 years? I want to have impact. I think the proudest thing I'm doing right now is I started a foundation that is changing home ec and family and consumer science curriculum to being empowering life skills for kids. And it's live in 4 middle schools in Clark County, and it's meant to be a contained curriculum that can be accessed by any school district in North America. And it's really good curriculum, but it's like totally retainable skills that every kid needs to know. It's how to poach an egg and roast a chicken and roast a carrot. It's how to read a lease and not sign up for a 24% APR credit card. It's like how to read a cell phone contract, which I challenge any of you, except that one nerdy lawyer in the corner, that you don't know how to do that. And we're setting another generation up to fail unless they can fend for themselves. And fending for yourself means knowing how to make a vinaigrette from scratch and scrambling eggs properly. Because if you go out to McDonald's and feed your family of 4, I can feed you 3 times on real food that will fill your belly in a healthy way. And you want to affect change for the long term, that's what we do. The other thing is, I just wrote this down. I'm going to start I want to start a youth organization powered by my daughter Beatrice, because she's badass. That would be called Citizen X, which would be doing sort of advanced voter registration for 16-year-olds, because the midterms are in 2 years, and we have to fucking change this shit because it's stupid. So, but politics aside. But yeah, that's where I see myself, is making change. Look, you got to have impact. You got to do what you want to do. Do I see myself with a cabin in the woods to write in somewhere beautiful with a nice vista? Yes. And an apartment in Montreal? Yes. Do I see myself traveling in Lisbon? Yes. Do I see myself eating food in Marrakesh? Yes. Not in the Marrakesh at Ponce City Market. It was okay. Good. Yeah, I mean, tech's got a really interesting influence on food right now. I mean, there's a huge ascendancy, and I'm hoping it's kind of a temporary ascendancy, because I don't think it's the right thing, of the Blue Aprons of the world and, you know, all these kit meals and stuff like that. It's like, what I want to do is rip one of those things apart and say, you can do all this in like 5 minutes, and then your food wouldn't be packaged in New Jersey. So you could make it from scratch in Atlanta. So that impact on it's been interesting. I think reservation systems and things like that are interesting. I think line management systems and how we're ordering food and inventory control is really being changed by tech a lot. But you know, you can over-techify something as beautifully authentic as a great restaurant experience really quickly. You're not going to fall in love with a sweet green, or if you do, you've been on Tinder too long. But you know, at a purely authentic restaurant that's delivering great food and great service and really pure hospitality and room that you just walk into, that moment when you walk into a restaurant that makes sense and you go, fuck, this place is cool. and you're like, man, it feels good in here. And you go home and you're like, yeah, the food was good, but it just everything felt good. It was fun. It was beautiful. It was cool. They weren't trying to oversell me on anything. It was like a really nice 2 hours. I want to go back. That's not tech. That's this. So I feel very safe in my job because we've got a lot of that. Beanie. Southern food is hyper regional as well, just like Italian food. The boot of Italy is what, the size of Florida? Yet the diversity of Southern food has the same diversity from Puglia to Naples that you see in Italy. It's reaction to the Ligurian coast is going to have a lot more seafood and brilliant stuff, and pastas are going to be more important there than when you go to the north and people going to Asti and asking for a bowl of fettuccine are kind of looked at in there because they don't really cook pasta there. They eat potatoes. So these things are really interesting. And when you go and traverse from outside of Tampa, which would be the really interesting, amazingly inflected areas that are really Cuban dominated, going up the coast in the panhandle of Florida and then into the Delta and then come back around, you see such diverse culture and you see those individual influences, and then you see the shape-shifting arc of barbecue and what the reaction to barbecue is and how they've cooked it over the years. Is it pulled? Is it whole hog? Is it brisket? Is it a sweet sauce? Is it a vinegar sauce? Is it a white sauce in Alabama? So that diversity of what we overall call Southern food or we overall call Italian food is really intriguing to me because I love that identifiable regionalism. Cool.
Yeah, I think we're all done. We've got some gifts for you.
Nice.
You're officially a member of Switchyards. This
Beautiful.
card will
Awesome.
open the doors here.
That's great.
And then when you come back, you've got your coffee mug.
Yeah.
Coffee's
cool.
included in membership.
Okay.
Tanner's here. We'll always hook you up with a coffee Monday
Nice.
through Friday when you're not at Spiller.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
And then
They charge me for coffee there. So.
And then we've got a shirt for you also.
Thank you.
Yeah, you
That's
got it.
awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.